I make videos describing my experiences, disposition, and outlook, and they're not necessarily representative of other people. This is an epistemological cert, but I'm just directly saying it in this one. And obviously this is gonna get cringe given the very subject of sexual attraction. If you're not asexual, consider how much more cringe you are with all of your horniness. I don't intend this as an entry-level explainer to link your parents to. I fucking hate your parents. Ace crash courses will already exist, and though I checked them out to see the representation, I've not been researching for this because my intent is to articulate my experience. So it's only my point on the spectrum I can nail. I'll foreshadow demi, recipro, and autistic for anyone that makes sense to. I've identified with the adjective asexual since being old enough for it to be relevant. It's not a loyalty bonus, I've kept it because it's remained true. Being here years old, I've had it remarked that I was an early adopter of the identity, that it wasn't part of the lexicon until the 2010s, and that's just bullshit, but you have to consider how precocious I am. Now, it was known before Tumblr. I don't remember when I learned of the term. Being internet illiterate probably helped, but it was just convenient to be able to describe my normalcy in contrast to all the weird things people might assume of me. I wasn't swatting up on sex on the internet at night, which is probably a good explainer of me being asexual. One of my teenage rock songs goes, "No, I don't want to interrupt you. Then goes on interrupting genital lives to rant against binaries and prescriptiveness. But it's kind of a mess too. To stop anyone asking, I'm not aware of having sexual trauma. I've been lucky enough to not be the target of that. I did experience gender dysphoria as a child and teenager and found bodies quite disgusting in general, which is rational enough. I disliked genitalia, wouldn't go near anyone's. I'm not aware of it being from any censorious conditions of upbringing, just a dislike. That's no longer a trait that describes me, but I'm not in the genitalia fan club either. I don't care much for categorical identities. Asexual just happens to be an accurate descriptor of me, an adjective. Maybe because it's the uncategory. The best means of explaining asexuality might be to get an allosexual to explain what sexual attraction is to you. And if you don't recognize it, you may well be asexual. Unfortunately, I cannot offer that explanation. Go see if you can find a video explaining allosexuality. Just type in sex weirdo. What I have is not that, absence of that, nothing or near nothing in its place. That's easy to understand because there's less information there to take in. I can experience attraction even to humans sometimes, but I've got the relative privilege of it being quite rare and kinda only when appropriate, only when invited of me. And I have the disprivilege of being so misunderstood. I'm just a troll whose intentions are good. It doesn't mean I'm not an awesome lay, it's just not a priority interest. Society is cursed with a lot of binary thinking, where traditionally you ought to be this, but if you tell them you're not this, they'll say, so you're that. It's binary opposite. If you point out you're not that, they might consider enough to conclude, so you're both. But then there's one last one to fathom, other than bits of this and bits of that, where what you are is neither. Your properties aren't to be understood from a process of elimination, but what's actually present. Please respect absence, zero-ness, and we can build up understanding from there. So in attraction, current society supposes that we have gendered attraction, like one or both of the binary. Monosexualities are such a tragic reduction as a default, but it'll take a few decades for us to get over them. And I think my experience is much closer to straight than the other one. I largely get along with women more because I'm not into the dullness of men's culture. However, I'm not into the dullness of women's culture. I like escaping the dullness of any gendered culture, and of the binary, I'm more like likely to access that with women because they weren't about to communicate with me within their gendered culture, and because men refuse men's intimacy and challenges to the structure of masculinity from something they would assume to be within it. I know that social cohesion isn't the same thing as attraction, but the very fact that I always process this consideration this way seems to show something about not having the attraction one. Like the time a friend asked me to show them someone I was chatting to on a dating app, and I automatically scrolled to the profile text rather than the photos because my compatibility was with thoughts more than pixels. But their appearance was still perceived along the way. I've mused for decades over whether I find anyone attractive, and it feels a more academic thing. It's kept me occupied. I keep trying to learn what's considered mainstream attractive, but they make these gender dimorphic sets of rules, and you're meant to learn both, and heterosexuals are supposed to learn one and be the other. But then breaking rules is way sexier than following rules. Learning the mainstream rules doesn't matter to my actual life. I couldn't fit in with them or want to. I do think there's slight stuff for me that informs the ability for superficial physical or aesthetic attraction, but I think the instinct I'm referring to actually just functions as thinking people are cool. Accurately, because they are, and their appearance conveys this. So that's a platonic outlook, but it doesn't mean I can only do platonic life. I've had partners, and I aspire to retaining that level of intimacy. I struggle to, maybe because of how difficult asexuality comes across. Maybe because structures are structured for people who aren't me, maybe because I'm off-putting, maybe because it'd involve getting up. I don't shout the identity asexual much because at its current level of public understanding, it doesn't help us to be understood as asexual, though it's on us to shout the identity more. We've only just got past people thinking it means you're a bacterium. That was tedious. It's how people will respond when they know enough microscience to know how bacteria reproduce, but not enough applicable science to know asexual people exist. Catch up with humanity, Poindexter. No offense to bacteria, but being asexual is still assumed to be a rare, isolating characteristic. If I put it at the top of a dating app profile, it'd do me more harm than the whole rest of me does, to the perspective of allosexuals. It would endear me to asexual people I'm more compatible with, but I swear it doesn't make me incompatible, except kind of with those for whom sexuality is really important. Grindr didn't go well. It does seem to scare people off, as if an asexual person categorically wouldn't be able to or interested in having sex. That's a widespread misunderstanding, a foreseeable one given the word, but it's not about navigating past awkward etymology like we do with bisexual. Note that we define sexualities as orientations of sexual attraction, the instinct I can't explain for you. That's not the same thing as the ability to fuck. I think a large part of the misunderstanding is in conflating sexual response, genital response with sexual attraction, and obviously they have some overlap. Sorry for the way your genitals just reacted to me saying genital response. Asexuality ain't the lack of genital response, for example to touch, maybe other stimulation, maybe even pornography, I couldn't tell you that one. It's just having low to zero sexual attraction, more in brain and instinct than grinds and lines. I recognize the instinct to try and falsify asexuality by referring to genital response, but not all genital response is horniness, and not all sex stuff is mashing your genitals together. The way the A prefix refers to a lack, but also covers low percentages, can bring a bit of imposter syndrome, because I am more than 0% sexual. Ladies. I think asexuality is likely a lot more common than we currently understand it, and it describes many contemporary people who will be assumed to be straight or whatever else. Historic people who married and fucked and had children because it was the structure of the lifestyle. Because it's not really mutually exclusive with those identities or activities, because even the well-understood sexualities are just the current simplifications of real human instinct, which is hyper-complex at the same time as being really really base. Fathom a character without predisposition, a blank character, an asexual existing within heteronormativity for whom that normativity wouldn't be perfect but wouldn't be destructive. They are most likely to end up fitting in with heteronormativity because it's their environment, because the sheer majority of surrounding players correlate with it, and without their own preference, only the preference of those nearby is relevant. It's selection bias in the stable marriage problem, or something you can read Wikipedia about, I don't know. Then fathom the many people around you who could count as asexual. Put simply, and requiring stereotypes, there's those in long-term relationships that have gotten less sexual, and that's often because at least one of the people has become less interested in sex. They're just too far down the path of identity normativity to want to identify as asexual, and we define sexualities as lifelong predispositions, as if unchanging, as if you're certain to figure out your lifelong sexuality sometime and then it'll stay accurate. In many such examples, it could be unfair or tragic that the person's needs are no longer met, but they're stuck in the institution of marriage. But there will also be those it suits just fine. Children can count as asexual to some extent, and people whose priorities don't include sex, people who intentionally live without it. Their priorities can still include marriage and parenting and romance, but then there's also plenty of those that we've marginalized as spinsters, hermits, whatever other slurs we have for people not playing the game that we demand they play because it'd make them more normal. I know it's potentially offensive to say that sexualities can change, but I also know that sexualities can change. And saying that in a video where I describe something about me that's not changed as an overview, but it's varied situationally and adapted a bit. In the first lockdown, I got to that lonely stage where I missed touch, missed intimacy, even sex, probably my horniest moment. I saw one of those assess your sexuality online quizzes, filled it in honestly with recent data, and it said I'm hella asexual. I think I'm straighter than the featureless character, maybe because of how dull men are, maybe because gay male culture generally seems a lot more sexual. It seems that way because they're an oppressed group and they end up needing to shout their otherwise erased orientation, but also because there's proportionately twice as many men as in heterosexuality, and men sure seem to be horny. If gay male culture is more sexual, it's because male culture is more sexual. If I accepted the reduction of these definitions constructed from human naivety, maybe I'd count as straight if I wasn't autistic enough to overthink everything and notice that the structuralism is harmful. A harm that doesn't compare to the harms I choose for myself. It'd be simple and barely inaccurate for me to identify as straight, but with low sex drive, and that's kind of an internalized ace-phobia and a denial of real nature, but kind of realism within the contemporary understanding. If someone watches this and concludes it's just me overthinking, welcome to what I do. I overthink with the pragmatic intent of solving things so we don't have to think as much, but even if it's true, one word for what I'm describing is asexual. So you just proved that asexuality is common. I couldn't compete on the straight market because I'm not what anybody's buying, at least until they realize how flimsy gender and definitions are. I'll be hot stuff after the Enlightenment. I can't actually take in the self-prescription of those who believe their experience of attraction correlates absolutely with the system of binary gender, the denial they're teaching themselves. Until we realize at large that monosexualities are an oversimplification, the best I can do is acknowledge that I don't have a monosexuality. Whilst I'm on identity reluctance, asexuality brings its own imposter syndrome to queer identity, because queer identity is often about sexual attraction, with at least shades of gay. These features just aren't inherent to asexuality, and gathering into a culture where sexuality is necessarily, and for many justly, prioritized isn't necessarily right for aces. Asexual people should definitely be welcome in queer culture, but I'm predisposed to feeling unwelcome, so I'm not leading the charge. I'm a-welcome. I'm not totally sold on asexuality being defined as asexuality, note the space between the words, to steal something from online atheism culture before we noticed how unpleasant the men were. Saying asexuality is asexuality is like saying bald is a hair color. That one fits even better here than the atheism one, because hair didn't come to us as a result of brainwashing, and there's plenty of people with a slight bit of hair that we define as bald, to the same extent that there's asexual people with some participation in sex stuff. But just on the side. Having to explain what I am, firstly, that's exhausting and needless. Why not just accept me from the ground up rather than as an aberration? But I don't encounter it as ways I'm distinct. Sexuality or lack thereof is only relevant to those I engage with sexually or romantically, and in my experience of such relationships, I think it's defined by what you find in common, not what you have as individuals. I remember someone not believing I'd never masturbated at age 15, like I was making it up to appear more pure. It just didn't occur to me, not an aspirational experience. I've caught up since, because I've learned it helps me get to sleep, and I struggle a lot with that. Other than that, it's boring. My first relationship as a teenager was with someone a lot more sexual than me. I did assume I'd catch up with them just from ignorance and inexperience and starving myself to procrastinate puberty. In participating in this, consent wasn't in question, but I couldn't necessarily adapt to their needs, nor them to my lack of needs or need of lack, and that proved to be the problem. That left me assuming I'm not compatible with people in general and undertaking my next relationship with the disclaimer that I'm asexual, with someone who also identified as such, and in that relationship it's narratively silly but ultimately elegant. We ended up enjoying sex together. Maybe a contrast there is the lack of preconceptions and expectations, making it a lot more cooperative an act. I think that still describes my level of sexuality. Sex is okay. Really. Something to enjoy occasionally, and that doesn't sound so extraordinary as to make a big identity and video about. My next relationship was with someone more sexual, and I adapted to them a bit. It was reasonable. Maybe that difference was part of why that one couldn't last, but it was still good while it lasted. I reached some misadventures in middle age of trying to be less defined by asexuality to participate in more promiscuous culture, as it seemed to be what I needed to be less lonesome. But simply, that doesn't work. It was a waste of time being untrue to myself. And yes, my attempt at promiscuity was pathetically chaste. At least I tried to try. That's almost all of my relationships, but I can still observe that the good ones are where you establish a comfortable balance together, that it's not really about the individual participants, but their combination. I'd be comfortable in a relationship that involves some sex for intimacy's sake, not a defining property. I've not tried a capital R relationship without sex stuff, because I've not had to navigate with anyone how to capitalize something like that. I do interpret I might potentially have some sexual dysfunction that could correlate with asexuality, and I'm telling the internet rather than a doctor, you're supposed to notice orgasms, right? I somewhat can, but I think it's far less than the ecstatic experience people describe it as. It's probably different for different people. I don't see that as a problem, just a quirk. I've definitely got worse things to complain to doctors about, things that affect my life. I'm bookmarking anorgasmia as my drag name. I am on antidepressants, but I was asexual beforehand. I am depressed, and I have no non-depressed experience to compare it to. Sex being a low interest, I'm not drawn toward adventurous sex. You know, where you go and meet up and tie ropes and camp out in the forest and earn badges. Vanilla's good. It's the best ice cream. I'm too ill for athletic stuff, too autistic for roleplay, too asexual to want to play all sexes expansion packs when the base game retains its charm. I think shades of the culture of sexuality can be too prescriptive and dismiss the simple, intimate comforts that are all some people want from it. Not everyone has to be doing a power dynamic. In trying them dating apps, at which I'm really bad because I'm nobody's type, except except YouTube viewers. It's dispiriting to see how little information people offer, because then there's nothing to engage with them on except what you can glean from their appearance. Appearance is more than nothing. Our appearance includes conscious choices that describe us, and sometimes even the bits we don't choose might be accurate to describe us, but I'm way more into what you choose to say. For me, I think I experience attraction nearly only via reciprocating someone else's attraction, and they've gone and made words for that too now, those alphabet people with their literate understandings. Reciprosexual, recipromantic, and things like demi and grey can work too. Please don't let grey be ruined as a sexuality identity. It has its own 50 shades, they're a lot less abusive, and ironically, much sexier. Each of these terms can be considered subclasses of asexuality, or maybe I should have promoted one of them to the video title. Reciprosexuality could be diagnosed from cruelly ignorant points of view as an epic lack of self-esteem, unassertion, emasculation, or maybe it's just a pretty convenient means of navigating attraction with certain consent, if you're okay with it happening just once a decade. I'm not arguing a moral case for it, because it's how I am either way, not a choice. I think once I reciprocate, there's no imbalance, at least hopefully not. I can see how it can be a scary construct compared to the idea of immediate mutual attraction, but don't most relationships involve someone initiating and someone learning to reciprocate attraction? I just happen to only have one of those two. A frequent bedfellow of asexuality is aromanticism, and I swear romance is just literally a fiction where you've got to unwrap and figure out what someone wants, but I also swear that I'm competent at it, that I've been part of romantic relationships where my contribution was what was wanted. When I'm not participating in that, I can see what an holistic fairy tale it is, but I think it makes more sense for me to say I'm single and adaptable than aromantic. Asexual people are a marginalized group who experience oppression, but I don't notice it much, really. It comes with multiple privileges. Not being ruled by libido, it's easier to respect hot people. If it's true that men think about sex every 7 seconds, then I have extra processing time for important thoughts like self-hatred. And knowing that that claim isn't true is just a prurient stereotype. And maybe an asexual perspective helps me see through prurient stereotypes, just not to stop them being assumed. Still, I've said that at the end of a long video whining about the alienation that comes with this A prefix. We have less access to intimate comfort, people not believing we're compatible, we get misunderstood as probably horny like all the probably horny people. I should probably mention the direct oppression of asexual people that I happen not to experience. Or we get cast as someone on whom loneliness is becoming, because nobody else becoming. And then there's the devastating loneliness. I don't know if I'd have a happier life if I wasn't asexual, but I'd be more understood. Ew. Ooh, one way to understand us is to consider the 6 out of every 7 seconds you're not thinking about sex, and it's basically that, but with an extra second. I don't know how else to express an absence of an assumed instinct. One way to dismiss an asexual is to say they've just not found their thing yet, and fair point, there are trillions of things in the world that I've not looked at or touched, so I don't know yet if they turn me on. I'll keep you updated. But the descriptor describes what I am, from cough here, years of evidence, and there's no motive to change because it's fine to be. And I'm not missing out because sex isn't all that interesting, as I've proven talking about sexuality for this long. Or not sexuality. Okay, if you liked this video, it might be able to reciprocate.